one snapshot that you remember about that particular campaign?
For me, it was winning the first game down in Wales. I think you need momentum, and to win your first game away from home against a good side, it was absolutely key to that season, and I think it gave us a lot of confidence because with England next up, and they were always a tough team to beat. But I think that first game was, and we scored 2 really good tries away from home.
I know that Ireland will obviously.
Yeah, well, Ireland was the place that I have the memory, and the South played New Zealand at Netherdale in the autumn, and we didn't play well. And on the Friday night before the Triple Crown game, Jim Telfer called us in for a meeting about 10 o'clock at night, and we were sitting there, and he spoke to the players, and then he got up and he put a video in, and then walked out the room. So it was that video of the South playing or getting demolished by the All Blacks, and his use of reverse psychology, of course, made us even more determined the next day to win the match.
Laidlaw goes. Laidlaw cuts back, going for the line. It's a try. Scott's arms raised aloft.
Jim was a world-class coach. Everybody thinks of him just as a great motivator, which he was. But Jim used to plan games, and he was happy to change tactics depending on who you're playing against. I remember going down to Murrayfield before the England game, and he had looked at English tapes and how flat their wingers stood, and we talked about putting the ball behind the wingers, and we did that, and we put them under a lot of pressure. But no, he was a great motivator. The stories that Roy told, they're legendary, but behind it all was a really good, thoughtful tactician.
The fact you mentioned putting the ball behind the wingers, is that not how the Ewan Kennedy try came about? Because I think the ball went in behind, and then it came back along the line, and he went through in a good line.
I think that's started with Roy. I think Roy put a kick down the blind side.
Yeah.
And that was Jim. Jim spotted there was space there and passed it on to the half-backs.
Yeah. So some of that came from the Lions tour. We became a bit familiar with the opposition, and we realised they maybe weren't as formidable as we thought they were. And I think going on the Lions tour opened our eyes a bit, and we knew a lot of the opposition, and there was players that we targeted.
We were pretty well prepared for it. That was the other thing about Jim Telfer. He knew France were a better side than anybody else in the championship, and probably better than us in terms of they had real quality players at that time. So he had prepared us for this. This would be the hardest game out of all the ones we played that season, and it proved to be. We struggled the first half. I personally, I was struggling to get into the game, but gradually, we found our way into it, and we got on top of them, and their discipline went at the end. But it was a very tough last game. That would you not agree, Roy? It was physically. It was a sort
of culmination of maybe 4 years. So Jim's, we went away and toured in New Zealand and Australia, and we had the Lions tour, and winning the Triple Crown was fantastic, for that group of players, and as the build-up went on towards the French game, I think we were quite happy with the Triple Crown, but as we got closer and closer, we became very determined as a bunch of players to, that we weren't going to lie down to the French team. As John quite rightly says, they outplayed us in the first half, but fortunately we managed to keep the score down. And then as the game went on, they gave away some penalties, and we got more and more into the game. John's kicked into the corner and that when we had the line out, and it was a fantastic achievement to sort of, in the build-up over a 4-year period to actually win the Grand Slam. It was fantastic.
To talk about putting, getting back into the game in that second half, and everybody remembers the final scenes with, I think, Jim Aitken raising his hands and walking off, but the bit that always gets me is Serge Blanco knocking on just before the fight, and that kind of summed up where their heads were at that moment.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we're saying. Their discipline went. We put so much pressure on them the second half that they couldn't cope, and the referee, he was particularly hard on Reeves, who's the captain. He lost the plot at the end, but it's really important that you hang in on these games, and I think that team had that quality, just to not give in. And as Roy said, although we were well beaten in that first half, the score didn't get away from us. And with Peter Dodds, who was probably the outstanding kicker in the world at that time, we always knew if we got penalties, he would get us back in the game. And of course, Jim's 60-metre try to win the game was just outstanding, wasn't it?
Oh, we're fine. There we go. Thank you.
Okay, guys, in here for me, nice and happy.